Okay, so for our fourth example, again, very similar to the last one, except I've added some decimals in here for us. So we've got 2.3 times y minus 1, and then we've got 1.4 times y minus 10. And again, because we have these parentheses as part of our problem, the first thing we want to do is distribute those parentheses. Both sides here, making sure to multiply each one by everything in the parentheses. So we're going to have 2.3y minus 2.3 equals 1.4y minus 14. Okay. Looking at this, we don't have any like terms. Again, when you're looking at like terms, you're only looking at one side of the equation. So notice that we only have a y and a constant on each side. So the next thing we want to look at doing is, again, combining those y's or moving those y's together. So we can go ahead and move our 1.4y to come over here to the other side. So we're going to subtract 1.4y from both sides of our equation. Again, and it really doesn't matter which one we subtract. We just typically, again, like to see that decimal or that variable over on the left-hand side. So 2.3 minus 1.4 is going to get us 0.9y minus 2.3 equals a negative 14. And again, making sure to keep that negative with that 14. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move our 2.3, since he's our constant on the side with our variable, over to the other side. So we're going to add that 2.3 to both sides. Oops, I kind of messed that up for a second. There we go. There's our 2.3. Remember to line up those decimal places because this is 14.0. So we want to make sure we're adding the decimals correctly, or you can do that in your calculator. So we've got 0.9y equals 2.3 minus 14, which would give us negative 11.7. And then we're down to our last step, and that is to divide both sides by the coefficient of our y. So that's 0.9, and again 0.9. And as crazy as this may seem, this actually comes out to a whole number. Y is equal to negative 13. Again, if it didn't come out to a whole number, we would just round it to 2 decimal places. Okay, so for our next example, we're going to pretty much run the gamut on this. The only thing we're not going to do in this particular problem is clear the fractions because we don't have any fractions. But we are going to do every one of the other steps to complete this problem. If you can see, we've got negative 6 minus 2 times 7y minus 2 equals 4 times negative 6y plus 2 plus 4. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people make in this problem is they see that negative 6 minus 2 and they want to combine those together and tell me that that's negative 8. But remember, the very first step, no matter what the problem looks like, is to distribute the parentheses. So this negative 6 is actually going to stay exactly like he is. We're just going to bring him down, and we're going to take this negative 2 and we are going to distribute him to both the 7y and the minus 2. So that's going to give us negative 14y plus 4. Remember, a negative times a negative is always a positive, equals. And we're going to do the same thing over here on the right-hand side. We're going to distribute negative 6 times 4 and positive 2 times 4. So that's going to give us negative 24y plus 8, and then the 4 is just going to drop down like he is, plus 4. He's not inside my parentheses, so he doesn't get my multiplication. Now, if I cover up the right-hand side of my problem and I just look over here on the left, you'll notice that we have both a negative 6 and a positive 4. Those are like terms, so we can actually add those together. We don't need to move them around. We don't need to do anything fancy. We just say negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. So this is going to be negative 2 minus 14y equals. And we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side of our equation. Again, notice that we have this positive 8 and this positive 4 that we can combine together. since they're both numbers and they're both on the right hand side. So this would give us negative 24y plus 8 plus 4 is going to give us 12. Okay, so we've distributed our parentheses, we've combined our like terms. So now we're going to start moving our variables around. And again, we can choose that we want to move the 24 or the negative 24y over to the left-hand side so that all of our variables are on the left. It's whatever makes you happy. So just decide which one you want to move. Here, let's go ahead and move that 24. Since it's a negative 24, we're going to add 24y to both sides. So we have negative 2, we didn't mess with him, and then 24 minus 14 is going to give us 10y equals 12. Again, that's because our 24s here canceled each other out. So now that we have all of our y's sitting right here on the left-hand side, we need to move this negative 2. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. So our 2's are going to cancel each other out, negative 2 plus 2. We're going to have 10y equals 14. And then our last step here, before we finish our problem off, is we're going to divide by that 10 in front of our y. Remember, we're always dividing by the coefficient of the number in front of our variable. So y equals 14 over 10. Now you remember, we always want to make sure our answer is in its most reduced format. So right now, 14 over 10 is not in its most reduced format. We actually need to reduce this down. Both 14 and 10 are divisible by 2. So we're going to divide out of 2, top and bottom. And that's going to give us y equals 7 over 5. So that is our answer. If you don't want to put your answer in fraction, again, we can put it in decimal. Y would equal 1.4. And that would be our final answer for that one. So for the last problem that we're going to do, it's very similar to the number 5 that we just finished doing. But I wanted to do this one with you because one of the biggest, again, a big mistake that people make for this particular problem is because there's not a number sitting here in front of my parentheses, a lot of people want to try to distribute that negative 7. So what I want you to do is, if you have a problem where you just have a plus a parentheses, or if it says minus a parentheses, either way, I want you to put the number 1 right there between that plus sign and the start of your parentheses, because what you're really distributing is that 1 to the 9n and the 2. So the negative 7, just like in the previous problem, is going to come straight down, and then 1 times 9n is 9n, 1 times 2 is 2. So notice that the 1 actually didn't change anything about our parentheses, but that's just to make sure that when you do your distribution, you're distributing the right number. So the same thing over here on this side. Notice instead of just a 1, it's actually a negative. So you can go ahead and put a negative 1. Again, just making sure we understand that we are distributing a negative 1 to both of these guys. So this is going to change it a little bit. It's actually going to change our signs. So this is going to give us a negative 6n and a positive 3 minus 9. Okay, and now from here we're going to do exactly like we did on the previous problem. The next thing we want to look at is combining like terms. If I look over here on the left-hand side of my equation, notice we have a negative 7 and a positive 2, both whole numbers, so we can combine those together. Negative 7 plus 2 would give us negative 5 plus 9n equals, and the same thing over here on the right hand side. I've got these two terms right here, negative 3 minus 9, that we can combine. That's going to give us negative 6n minus 6. Okay, so we're getting there. We're only a few more steps left. We want to move our n's to the same side. Again, if we want to continue doing what we're doing, we can take this in and move him over here to the left-hand side. Since he's a -6, we're going to add 6 in to both sides, making sure to line everything up nice and pretty. So we're going to have -5 plus 15n equals -6. Okay, now that we have all of our n's over here on the left-hand side, remember we're going to take our constant, move him over here to the right so he's away from our n. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. So 15n equals -1. And we're down to our last step. We're going to divide by that coefficient of our n. So this is our 15, both sides. Our 15s end up canceling each other out. So n equals -1 over 15, and I can't reduce that down. So that would be my final answer. And again, if you wanted to, you could put that into decimal format. It's up to you. Just remember to round it to 2 decimal places.